in from? We're just working on the audio if anyone's getting a bit of a feedback loop there, but we'll fix that. Great to have Raja on today. We'll just let the audience build over the next minute or so. Hi, Anuj.
Guys, wherever you're calling in from, we're a pretty global audience today. Raja calling in from the States. Early morning for him. Got some amazing substitute coffee going. And for us, we've clearly just about to hit lunchtime. So if you're tuning in from wherever you are, such a pleasure to have you on today. Mark, why don't we kick off the show today?
I think we should get started. Of course, we'll have some people joining, but there's always the playback, and we're also streaming live on YouTube. So welcome, everybody. Yeah, over to you, Richie, to lead us off.
Totally. Well, look, I'm just going to say what an honor it is to be hosting this show. And in fact, we've clearly made an exception for Raja because we don't usually do this time slot. But of course, Raja is busy man from coming over the States. So we had to do that. But Raja, you are the CMO, the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer for what is probably one of the most renowned organizations in the world. And dare I say, you've been able to make it even more renowned with the strategies and innovativeness that you bring to that organization, which is absolutely brilliant. Globally recognized for your innovative thinking, your leadership in business, and more so, quite honestly, the string of accolades and rewards that you have won is just amazing. I'm just going to call out a few because you could probably spend the hour doing it. So the WFA Global Marketer of the Year, Forbes top 5 world's most influential marketing CMOs, and clearly also to mention that you've entered the CMO Club Hall of Fame as well. Just absolutely brilliant. As in the heights of a marketing career, it really doesn't get much better. But the last thing that I do want to mention is that, and in fact, I was walking through Mumbai airport a number of months ago, and I was literally going through the equivalent of W.H. Smith's, and I saw Raja's book right in front of my eyes, and I had to pick up and get a copy. So quantum marketing, as it were. What I love about the book, Raja, is the fact that you actually talk about marketing in different stages and the different quantums that marketing has been through over time. And now we're entering a real period of absolute disruption, the 5th quantum, as it were. So I'd love to get into the details of that. But to anyone who hasn't read the book, it's a fascinating read that talks you through the different eras and then really gives you enough to inspire you to want to understand how marketing is about to be disrupted, or is currently disrupted, but being more disrupted now than ever before. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that, but more so than anything, such a great pleasure and pride that I get to welcome Raja onto this show. Thank you for joining us this morning and afternoon.
Richard, thank you so much for having me, and particularly appreciate the flexibility of your timing. So I'm delighted to be here and looking forward to a good conversation, and happy to take the conversation anywhere. So I'll be totally uncensored and unfiltered. So let's go for it.
That's fantastic to hear, Roger, because I think you've kind of seen it all. And so for many people who are just at the beginning of trying to figure out where do they go within marketing, your insights are going to be invaluable. So let's start quite broad in terms of the world that we're currently occupying with the pandemic. I mean, it's just been a crazy year or so in different countries, very different experiences. I mean, huge variation in terms of vaccination programs and so on. I think on balance, there's now a turn towards feeling more positive about what lies ahead. So looking forward, what do you think you've learned from this period that you can take forward into the future?
Yeah, see, I think there have been a very good number of unexpected things that happened last year in terms of the changes in the consumer behavior, the consumer landscape that affected marketing in a very significant fashion, right? So, for example, everything digital got accelerated by almost 4 to 8x. What I mean by this is, pre-pandemic, people used to do online shopping. But during pandemic, they had very little alternatives to online shopping. So people had to get on online shopping. So normally what would have taken about 7 to 8 years in terms of penetration of e-commerce has actually been accomplished in 1 year. Now, there are people like me who have been using online commerce or e-commerce forever. However, I would never shop for groceries and my produce, vegetables and fruits online. I would always go to a shop. But having tasted that, I have now expanded the categories in which I'm doing online shopping. Having tasted that now, it's very unlikely that I'll go back to a physical shop with the same level of intensity like I used to pre-pandemic, because online suddenly got used to it. Then you have got people who never were online. So now they have got used to the convenience of online and they started using for their purchases. So this is what we call as the secular growth and the category growth, which is happening phenomenally. So one change. Second, the nature of workplace is totally now different, right? People have discovered last 1 year without a huge loss of productivity, you could actually stay at home and work. So a lot of millennials particularly are asking, why do we even need to go to work? I'll go stay in some exotic place and I'll work from there. So long as I have a good internet connection, I'm done. So the nature of workplace is changing. Why is it important, particularly for marketing? Because marketing has got a lot of co-creation. You're interacting with the agencies, you're interacting with the team, you're sitting in rooms and brainstorming, etc. On the one hand, that's going to change quite a lot now. The agency interaction process, the way you approve your creatives, the way you develop the creatives, the entire process has to be rethought. That's one thing. On the B2B side, this is not just about the consumers, but even if you look at B2B, I would see, for example, myself going to a number of conferences. I would see myself traveling quite a lot to meet clients around the world. I used to be for 200 days every year on the road outside of United States, right? And in the US, add 50 more. Literally, I'm living off of a suitcase all the time. Now, suddenly when I was grounded, and nothing really bad has happened as a result of being grounded, and actually, in a given day, I could meet with clients in Germany and in Japan and in Brazil, which would have otherwise taken me probably 3 different weeks to travel to those places. Productivity has gone up in a phenomenal fashion. Of course, finance CFOs, the chief financial officers, they're very happy because the travel and entertainment budget comes down. So what happens is there is a complete reworking of how we need to really look at organizing ourselves. Last point I would say on the B2B side particularly is all these industry summits, industry forums that you would go to at industry conferences. That has completely changed. How are you going to do trade shows tomorrow? It's going to be a lot more hybrid. Digital is going to be irreversibly a part of our life. If that is going to be the case in the B2B context and the B2C context, as marketers, we have to adjust our strategies and in many cases, change them pretty significantly. So it's going to be a very exciting journey, and there are a lot of learnings that we had over the last 1 year that we are taking into the future.
Raj, I love that. And I love the confession about how much time you spent on planes. Clearly that couldn't have been easy in itself. But I wonder, are you a happy man on the back of these changes that you are now seeing personally? Whether that's more time on the ground, more time with family. How are you adjusting to it? Or what certain aspects are you missing of the old world?
So here are a couple of things. There are positives and negatives in every situation. The positives are I'm able to spend a lot more time with the family. And I have 2 dogs, and which I love them, and I spend time with them, walking them, and so on, playing with them. That's been amazing for me. Second, it had freed up a lot of time, which otherwise was probably spent at the airports and traveling on the plane without a fantastic Wi-Fi connection and so on. And I think that takes its own toll. And that time when it got freed up, I could actually write the whole book during the pandemic. So, writing a book typically is a very fairly intensive kind of an effort, and actually could free up enough to be able to get that accomplished. So that's the second thing, which is very, very positive. The third thing, like I said, is the productivity is huge. The downsides are, number one, there is a blurring of the lines between personal life and work life because the meetings are happening practically around the clock. So you don't have the compartmentalization. That in some cases is very good, but that's blurring. That's number one, work-life balance. The second thing I would say is there is always something unique about breaking bread together with other people. There is nothing that substitutes physically sitting in front of somebody else, your team members, your clients, breaking bread with them, chatting, and so those kind of things are missing. And lastly, on the office front, particularly when you're interacting with your peers, there's a lot of informal interaction that happens. You just casually pop into somebody's room, or you are sitting in the water cooler conversations and so on. Those practically disappear in the remote environment where you're talking about scheduled time. When you schedule things, it becomes a formal time. Formal time is sort of, it's got its own limitations of how it can help and enable business relationship building or not. So it's a little different kind of, so there are positives and negatives, but overall I feel that we have got some very good learnings, to Mark's previous point, out of pandemic, even on this work front. And I think how we adjust it and how we change it, it's going to be interesting. Some people just don't want to come back to office. Some people want to work 2 or 3 days, and they're willing to change their jobs. Some people on my team, for example, they say, hey, we would like to live in Puerto Rico and work out of Puerto Rico. Just because they love the weather and the place is fantastic. So people are reevaluating their priorities and how they would want to live. So it's going to be fascinating to see this.
Awesome. Raja, you've concentrated in all the impacts of these seismic changes pretty well. And I would say personally, hallelujah to the thought of getting back into the office, that connection, that belonging, that chemistry, or breaking bed, as you said. I want to rewind the clock a bit now and go back to the past and ask, how did you come to be in marketing at all? What was your journey into and through the marketing world?
Okay, ironically, it was a little accidental, right? I did my chemical engineering as an undergrad from Hyderabad in India. And I wanted to be an environmental engineer. So I did my environmental engineering as a specialization within chemical engineering. And after doing my chemical engineering, I wanted to do my MBA because that was a better career path than just being a hardcore engineer in India, at least in those days. So I said, I'll do my MBA. And I was fortunate to get into the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore. So I went there. And I was specializing there in environmental management. In the internship, summer internship, between the first and the second years, I happened to be at a company called Lakme to do my internship on a logistics project. And I happened to overhear a conversation at the time from my boss he was having with the agency people just in the next cubicle. And they were talking about how color cosmetics are a little bit of a taboo in those days amongst the more conservative families. So they would not encourage their daughters or sisters or whatever to wear color cosmetics because it was seen to be attracting negative attention. So you should not do that. If you're a good girl, you don't attract attention. That was a framework, and they were figuring out how to actually solve it. I said, why is it so difficult? Why are these guys struggling? I just sort of put on a piece of paper. I said, is it bad to look good? That was my headline. So I just sort of created a small ad, and then I showed it to him, and he was very impressed. And then subsequently, it went on to become a campaign and so on. But the thing is, when I had that kind of an intuitive response to that situation and the praise that I got as a result of it, I suddenly said, maybe this is actually what I'm going to be good at. So I moved into marketing. And ever since, now it is 36 years, I'm very much in this field, and I enjoy it as much as I did on day one. So it's been a fun journey. So, but for that interaction, probably I would have been an environmental management guy, maybe somewhere in United Nations or God knows where, because United Nations was my aspiration in those days. I should be managing the policy for around the world about environmental control and climate. Those days we never called it climate change, but you're talking about environmental protection. It's the same concept, different terminology. But that's where I thought I'll go. But fate took me in a different direction, and this was purely accidental.
Well, that's Raja, just lovely that there's a very, very specific spark moment where you lit the touch paper. Brilliant to be able to put your finger on it. Sorry, Richie, back to you.
Not at all. Is it bad to look good? Bloody hell, what a great line. There you are. Did it end up being the strap line of the campaign?
It was actually the headline. It was a one ad. It went well. It had done well. And so that was actually even now I have got that cut and paste in the frame in my home as my very first creative exercise.
Amazing. But Raja, I want to pick up on something that you said, where you realized that your initial response, you had something intuitive that sparked it into our industry, and then you fell in love with it. And I love it even more, where you say, even to this day, you love it as much as you did then, because I tell you what, so do I. Every single day, I love what we do. But I want to ask, you talked about intuition and instinct being a key ingredient to marketing to spark you into this space. Do you think that's what it needs, or do you think there's much more skill that's required to go along with our space? Because I'm a leading question because everyone does feel that, instinctively some people are more creative than others. But I wonder if this intuition is vital for success in marketing.
See, I would say it depends on how far you want to go in marketing. If you want to just dabble, probably intuition, you can do without it. You can get into a very data analytical, logical, rational aspects of marketing. Areas like marketing technologies, into marketing analytics. You could get into performance marketing. So there are so many areas that you can get in without that creative streak in you. That'll take you quite well up to a point. On the other hand, if you don't have, typically if you look at the human brain, you've got the left side and the right side hemisphere, as they say. The left hemisphere is very analytical, logical, quantitative. The right side is qualitative, intuitive, aesthetic. And it's a different way they are wired, right? The ideal marketer is somebody who actually leverages both sides of the brain. They are blessed with both the creative capabilities as well as the rational, analytical, quantitative capabilities as well. Because marketing today is not either or. If you are a pure creative, an agency route might be a better one for you. Not necessarily a regular marketing as a brand manager, because you cannot be a good brand manager or a good marketer in a client side without having your understanding of data. On the other hand, on the agency side, we can get into the creative side, and that's where you are trying to be very sensitive to people's emotions, their feelings, and what drives them to act, and then know what the triggers are and come up with those. That's a creative side. Now, I keep talking about it, and then I have written, as you know, in my book, Quantum Marketing, which is I talk about the Leonardo da Vinci kind of personalities is what we require. Now, Leonardo da Vinci was one of those rare, amazing characters who was a phenomenal engineer on one side, but he was also an extraordinary artist on the other side. So not everyone is blessed with that kind of a thing, but I would say you should at least aspire to be there. I think the logical, analytical thing is as much innate as much as it is nurtured. Same thing with the creative. Creative, you might not be able to come up with creative stuff yourself, but you can condition and train yourself to appreciate creativity, to recognize working creativity. Like it's a simple example. There are people who know nothing about painting themselves, but they have the sense of appreciation for fine art. They can say which is just scribbles versus which is a fine piece of art. Right? And that appreciation, that sensibility is absolutely required for a good marketer. So you don't have to necessarily be yourself creative, but you should have the creative sensibility. So I would say this is how I would approach, and that will take you really long because that's a rare breed. You don't have too many marketers who are good on both sides.
Yeah, I think that's a life's work to be that whole-brained Da Vinci. But a great pursuit and very rewarding, I think, for many people in their careers. Now then, Mastercard, massive company, massive job. Just wanted to know what brought you there and what keeps you there.
Right. So I used to be in the healthcare industry just before I came to Mastercard. So before Mastercard, I was with Citigroup. And from Citigroup, I moved to the healthcare, and I was in the healthcare industry. And my ex-boss at Citibank, Ajay Banga, I worked for him for nearly 15 years, and we had a great relationship and excellent, lots of respect for each other. And he became the CEO of Mastercard. So when he became the CEO of Mastercard, I got a call from him saying that, would you want to come and join and run marketing here? And I thought it was going to be a great opportunity because in the healthcare, it was more a US only kind of a role, whereas this was a global role and something which, I thought, and I bring a lot of globality to my perspective as opposed to just US-centric or any country specific, because I lived and worked in multiple countries from India to, United Arab Emirates to the United Kingdom to the US. So I said that'll be a great opportunity. So I have come here. So that's how my move to Mastercard has happened. And now I'm here. This is my 8th year. I'll be just completing my 8th year shortly. So I'll be entering my 9th year here, and I thoroughly enjoy every single day here. Energizing, a very inspiring environment we have. Unlike many companies, this is one company which I feel very fortunate to have joined because it's in a truest sense, not for political correctness sense or for sound bites sense, but in a truest sense, it's a purpose-driven company. So, for example, people might not know that we have been funding cancer research, and we have enabled the discovery of 7 drugs for a cure of different types of cancer. We feed poor children around the world, and we have raised God knows how much about millions and millions of dollars for that, and then we contribute to feeding poor children through the World Food Program. We have recently contributed. There is a Mastercard has got two companies share the name Mastercard. One is Mastercard, the commercial entity. The other one is called Mastercard Foundation. Mastercard Foundation, all they do is just philanthropy and social, and it's probably the largest or the top 2 or 3 largest corporate philanthropic foundations in the world. They recently contributed $1.3 billion to Africa vaccination programs. So a lot of things like this are done, which makes it very purposeful. So you're not just pursuing profits, but you're also bringing purpose to life. And that's a real privilege to be in that kind of a situation.
Raja, I'm gonna perhaps ask a slightly controversial question here, because you're 8 years into the journey. Ajay Banga probably about 10 or 9-10 years, maybe just ahead of you in that tenure. So to what extent did you guys, being the top leadership team, actually steer Mastercard into being this purpose-driven company, as opposed to you seeing it before you got here?
So I knew Ajay since Citibank days, as I said, and an extraordinary human being, and somebody who has always been extremely helpful to everyone. And when he came in here, even before I came on board, he started a number of purpose-driven initiatives. So I could see that in his role as the CEO, he was already doing a lot of great things. So it was not. So that's one part of it. Second thing, what was my role and contribution was saying that how can we make these good for society kind of initiatives, not as standalone initiatives, but blended into the core business model. Like if I'm creating, for example, a partnership with Stand Up to Cancer Foundation, I was combining that with the restaurant promotions in the US, or World Food Program programs, combining with spend programs in Europe, like spending on your cards. What we're trying to do is we created we created a purpose that was very clear and tangible. So one is Ajay has this philosophy. How do you translate that philosophy into something which is easy for everyone to understand in a tangible, simple form? That is marketing and communications. That's what we do. Once you have got that, those pretty statements, simple, pithy, have to be brought to life. Marketing brings them to life. Because internally, you have to inspire your people across the company, not just the marketing department. That's what internal communications does, which is also part of this marketing organization. And externally, you actually not seem to be somebody who is trying to purpose wash things, but because people can see through you, and if you're pretending and faking it, then you're doing it just for a temporary advantage, and people are not idiots, so they'll see through you. So you have to be authentic, consistent, and do things that are making an impact. And all this stuff, marketing brings to life in a very, very compelling fashion. So that's what I have been trying to do here over the last years that I have been here. And the journey has been extremely productive. And, I'll just give you one statistic, simple thing. Mastercard is wrongly perceived to be a credit card company. The reality, we don't issue a single credit card. It is the banks which issue credit card. We are a technology company which provides a platform for the banks to issue cards and for the merchants to accept the cards. It can be credit card, debit card, prepaid card, whatever be the card, right? But we are considered to be credit card. And credit card companies, unfortunately, have a slightly negative reputation that they actually make you spend on things that you don't need to spend on and drive you into debt and charge you massive interest rates. That's a popular misconception, but it is what it is. Now, when we are doing these kind of purpose-driven efforts and cause marketing in a very sensible, consistent fashion, it started changing the perception of the brand, and we became the 4th most loved brand, for example, in the United States. And that doesn't happen by itself. And secondly, my budgets are minuscule compared to the giants out there like the Apple or the Google or the Facebook and Unilever, Procter & Gamble, and so on and so forth. So at that time, when I took over, Mastercard was the 87th ranked brand in the world, still a top 100 brand. So I was very privileged and honored to have had the opportunity to serve a brand like Mastercard at that time. But now we moved up all the way to number 10. So we're a top 10 brand in the world. And that's a huge sense of gratification and satisfaction for me. And in the United States, we are ranked at number 8, which is probably the most competitive market in the world. And here we are. So it's moving in the right direction, driving the business, driving the people's feeling of satisfaction and happiness and so on. So a lot of it is actually enabled and brought to life by marketing and communications here at Mastercard.
Wow. These are incredible achievements. And it would be a bit of an understatement to say you've had an awful lot of success in your career. But it will never be perfect for anybody. So I'm interested to know where some of the bumps in the road have come along and how you've adapted to them.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent one. I'll give you 2 very quick examples. So as a marketer, when you create something, a product, or you create a campaign, you get a little married to it. And you want to sort of keep giving it more and more and more time, hoping that it will succeed if it has not succeeded. And there have been instances where in retrospect, in hindsight, say, I should have killed that long back. Why did I let it draw on for so long? Because it was just a drain on the resources and on the attention. And if it was diverted to something else, it would have been so much better. So those kind of examples, there are a few. The second one I would say is understanding cultural sensitivities. In a global role, particularly, or as a global citizen, you need to understand that countries are similar, but they are different as well. There are universal principles, but those universal principles manifest differently depending on the cultural context. So one such example, when I was in Citigroup in the Middle East, and I remember it very, very vividly, Citigroup globally launched a campaign called Where Money Lives. But when it had to be translated to Arabic, it's not where money lives, but it came through as where money is brought to life. So it seemed to be a decent approximation. So I just went ahead and then launched that in Dubai. And then very quickly, we got a lot of backlash saying that who the hell is Citibank to be bringing money back to life? Nobody can bring anyone to life except the Almighty. So you guys know, do you think you're gods? I said, wow. And then immediately we shut it down, right? The key thing is you need to be respectful of and sensitive to the aspects in different cultures. You have to be completely in tune and not be out of sync. And that was a huge learning. And from then on, as I moved either to different geographies or actually started looking at, from a global perspective, we don't try to make one size fits all, or it is not just about translation or transliteration, but actually the concepts have to be extremely native to every single culture. That is a huge learning very early on.
What an amazing example there, Raja. And a tough one, probably a tough one to manage, being on the ground in the UAE to be able to deal with that. That's a big gig. But I want to ask, do you believe in the concept of the personal brand? And if so, clearly you've probably got one of the best personal brands in the entire marketing industry. How do you foster that? How did you get there? What did you do?
See, there are 2 things. One is I always talk about, as a marketer, you understand that firstly, the product has to be good. Then the packaging has to be good. Then there has to be promotion, right? An individual is no different. You're a brand, you're a product. And firstly, you have to be good, which means you study well, you read well, you get good experiences, etc. That's very important. So get your product into good shape, have a good formulation. The second thing is you need to obviously package it properly. Communication is extremely critical. Packaging, I don't mean in terms of physically how you dress or how you look. These days, nobody cares how you look and how, but it is about how you communicate. That's very critical. Are you able to inspire your teams? Are they able to emotionally buy into your vision? Are you simplifying complex things in a manner that everybody is able to understand and grapple with things and then move things forward, etc.? That's very critical. That's part of your packaging. The third, like for example, look at me. I have a very strong Indian accent. And in the old days, marketing was perceived to be a glamorous function with a lot of show and stuff like that. But that's not how it is. People may get carried away with your packaging, external packaging for 5 minutes. But actually, when the communication starts happening, they realize you are good, bad, or mediocre. Very important. Third, promotion. Promotion, when you say even a good product requires good communication, good advertising, or call it whatever. So the key thing is networking is very important. That's your distribution channel. Letting people know that you are good is important, but there's a difference between selling yourself versus marketing yourself. Marketing is about creating a pull. Selling is about creating a push. So if you try to push yourself onto others, there'll be instant organ rejection. But if you create a pull, by the kind of stuff that you are doing consistently, not a flash of the pan, but consistently you're doing a great job. And letting people see it and not push it, not brag about it, not sort of, it's a very fine territory. Your enthusiasm can carry you into the sales territory, but don't get there. Let your work speak for itself. But don't be so shy that you're even scared to talk about your work. It's a fine balance. If you do that, I think that's how you build your brand over the years. And trust is at the core of it all. A brand needs to be trusted. An individual needs to be trustworthy. And that's something which is very, very important. So don't ever go for short-term gains or short-term flash and spotlight. Try to play for the long term. That's what I would say.
Wow.
I love the way that you bring the 4 Ps into personal branding, but of course, but absolute genius. I've never heard anybody put it into that context. We didn't talk about price, but maybe we don't need to talk too much really about that. But so the book, we've had a few people on who have written books and often have very different motivations. It's a very personal journey. And Richie, of course, is now a published author as well. Congratulations, Richie, even in the last days.
Thank you.
Was it a bucket list item or a moment of madness? Or what was your journey towards wanting to write a book? And
I'll give you actually, so I'll tell you, it's very fascinating, right? So firstly, my grandfather has written a book and my dad has written a book. So it almost became like an obligatory thing for me that I have to continue the family tradition. I should write a book too. That was how it was in the beginning. Then the second part of it is in 2013 or 2014, I presented to Mastercard's management team and then the whole company about what I call as the next generation marketing strategies. And I called it Marketing 4.0 internally. And then I went externally and I spoke about it at Cannes Lions and I said how you actually change the face of marketing and how marketing is very different. And I call it Marketing 4.0. Fast forward to 2016 or 2017, I fell off my chair when I saw there was a book called Marketing 4.0, published by or written by Philip Kotler, who I consider as my guru, because I learned during my MBA from his book, the foundation, the fundamentals, the principles of marketing. So I said, my God, he has written exactly, we got the same title. When I looked at the content, it was very, very similar, extremely similar. So it was a validation that I was on the right track, except that he is a guru because he could write a book. And I was just happy with my internal and some presentations at this forum and that forum. I said, what an idiot I am. I should have written a book myself. I would have done it 3 years back. That was one thing. So I was doing in 2018, again, a strategic exercise for Mastercard in terms of where the future is going and how. And I started saying, okay, I should this time write a book. And what was the beauty was that there was so much amount of substance and content that I had and some very controversial thoughts, very provoking thoughts that I had. I said, I have to capture it into a book. but I didn't want to call it marketing 5.0. It looks like too much of a me too in this kind of a situation. And I'm not ever going to be in a battle, for supremacy against my, guru. Right. So I said, no, let me not take the number game, but let me just get into something else. So that was the genesis. And then when I started writing it, it was a fascinating experience because there are a lot of concepts which are very fuzzy in everyone's mind. But when you want to start putting it on paper, and firstly, congratulations, Richie, and you'll be able to obviously relate, with your book writing, your thoughts get clarified. You need a lot of clarity of thinking to be able to put your thoughts, because once you are putting it on in a book or in writing, it sort of gets memorialized. So it is attributed to you. So you better be having the right things with the right logic, with enough substance to be able to link to you. Otherwise, you can really, So I had to really think through and put everything. And when I started doing it, my own thinking became so much more clearer. And it was a fascinating journey. And I could finish the first draft of the book from start to finish in 3.5 weeks.
Wow. Raja, so my confession is I'm the first person in my family to ever write a book. So
good show. You can start the tradition.
There we go. My son is in for it, I guess, and my daughter as well. I must admit, I was watching an interview with you and Gary V, massive fan of him as well. And you talked about how most of the marketing models that exist today are completely useless. And I think I'm quoting you when I say that, useless to kind of figure out how marketing needs to be done both today and the future. Talking about disruption is already here. But I'd love to just dive in a little bit and talk about the fifth quantum, as you call it. Lovely to hear how the term the fifth came about. But tell us a little bit about that and what you then believe is going to be the next era of marketing moving forward.
Yeah. So, marketing was being practiced since antiquity. And there is evidence of marketing even 2000 years back in the ruins of Pompeii and so on. From then on, it has been evolving. And each time there is some kind of a technological advancement. A couple of technologies will propel marketing into the next paradigm. There is a paradigm shift with technologies. So from the first paradigm, which was predominantly about product marketing, moved into emotional marketing, when marketers' ability for storytelling has dramatically jumped up with the advent of radio first and television next. With the advent of internet, it ushered marketing into the third paradigm. Internet and data analytics were the two technologies which moved marketing from paradigm 2 to paradigm 3. In 2007, with the launch of iPhone, mobile devices became very ubiquitous, mobile connected devices, and you also have social media platforms with the scaling of Facebook that year. Between these two technologies, marketing has been ushered in to the fourth paradigm. We are now at the cusp of the fourth and fifth paradigms. And why do I say that is, in the past, there were two disruptive technologies at a time, literally, to move marketing into the next paradigm. Now we are about to be confronted by 24 technologies: artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, drone deliveries. Logistics is going to be very different. You have got wearables, you got Internet of Things, you got smart speakers, you got autonomous cars, and it's like the blockchain. The list keeps going on. 24 technologies that are out there. Each one of them has got a profound impact on consumer behavior and on marketing, therefore, and organizational behavior and B2B marketing, therefore, as well. So in that kind of a scenario, when I started looking at how we do marketing today, already a lot of things which are taught to us and have been practiced for years and decades are falling apart. Like, for example, we talk of purchase funnel. In the past, the method that it used to be awareness, interest, desire, action, satisfaction. It's supposed to be a 5-stage purchase cycle. There are multiple models. This was called the IDAS model, IDAS 1 or IDAS 2. That is just not valid anymore today. The funnel has collapsed. Advertising. This is my favorite, or one of the favorites, which I say, look, advertising is not the way to go forward, at least in the way that we know. The need for communication does not disappear, but advertising is going to radically change. Why do I say that? When I'm sitting in front of, for example, a YouTube video, I'm watching some Bollywood song, or I'm watching an animal video, or whatever. Every 3 minutes, there is an interruption by an ad. So even if it is in the middle of the song, it stops me. Now, And then I'm waiting for that skip button to appear. When it says skip now, I'm not paying attention to the ad. In fact, if I pay attention, I'm 100% sure I will never buy that damn product because they're destroying my experience. Okay, and this is a marketer talking, right? As a consumer. Now, what do I do? Many people have put ad blockers. 600 million conservatively, and 2 billion people have put our ad blocks on the other extreme estimates. So the reality is somewhere between 600 and 2 billion. Let's say 1 billion people. 1 billion people have installed ad blockers, which means marketers cannot reach them on those devices. They are going away from marketing or from advertisements in a big way to ad-free environments and willing to pay money to keep these marketing pests out. They're going to Netflix, they're going to Amazon. So with the result of which, what happens is we are losing those audiences. Their attention is being shifted somewhere else. So why do I, as a marketer, now if I put my hat on, that's a nightmarish scenario for me. Because if people are leaving and they hate advertisements, how am I going to reach them? How am I going to tell them my story? It's a very big challenge, right? But at the same time, just because I have a challenge, I cannot ignore the reality that consumers are facing. I have to find a different way of communicating my message to them and impressing them to buy my brand as opposed to somebody else's brand. That is going to be very critical. So advertising has to be totally reinvented. Holding on to the old models is simply not going to work. Now, these are going to only get accentuated when you're looking at these new technologies that are coming. Everything has to be reinvented in marketing. Loyalty, for example. I read it on BBC.com, and that's what the genesis of the whole idea. One of the articles, it said, they have done a survey amongst people who are in relationships, married relationship or live-in relationship. More than 70% of them have admitted, both men and women, that they have cheated on their partners. So I said, okay, that's interesting statistic. I would have thought probably it is maybe 30, 35, 40%, whatever, but 70% seem to be overwhelming majority. I said, okay, if people in their personal lives have made an explicit or implicit commitment that they will be loyal till death do us part, or they also are aware of the consequences of not being loyal, because if they are caught, their reputation goes to the toilet, they got financial implications, there is emotional trauma to people in their circles. In spite of knowing the consequences and in spite of making the commitments, they are not loyal anyway. So if that's the case, why we as marketers expect people to be loyal to our brands? We are so low, way low down in the hierarchy of everything. Why would we really run loyalty programs and spending hundreds of billions of dollars as an industry annually? We need to rethink the concept of loyalty completely. And I keep saying loyalty is dead. It's not the way it is. It's actually a different way how to approach it. It's preference management. You need stickiness, but don't mistake stickiness for loyalty. It could be a lack of choice. It could be a temporary incentive that the consumer has got. So if you reframe the whole thing, your strategies will be totally different. So I'm looking at every single aspect of the entire marketing value chain. And I said, things are not going to work. We have to reinvent and reimagine marketing. And that new way of marketing is what I titled as quantum marketing, which is the title of my book as well. But we need to rethink and reimagine marketing completely.
Raja, that's a brilliant way to bring that insight around the falseness of loyalty to life. We've already had so many pearls of wisdom on your perspectives in marketing. We've come to the end, more or less. Time for one last quick question. Many people watching on playback will be trying to figure out their careers, particularly in the early stages of that. What would be your sage piece of advice for people trying to figure out how to craft a career in marketing?
So firstly, what I would say, I'll give 3 sane pieces of advice. The first one is, in the future, competition is going to get even more brutal. Companies need marketing to differentiate and succeed in the marketplace. So the prominence of marketing in future will be very, very high. So it's a great field to be in, number one. Number two, marketing is no longer a single specialization that you can stay in those swim lanes and just do pure marketing. Marketing is more like a general management role with a deep understanding of marketing, but also a decent understanding of data, of finance, of public relations, etc. So you need to be striving to be a 360 or a holistic marketer like a Leonardo da Vinci to the extent that you can. If you are not, surround yourself with people who complement your strengths. So if you are very creative, make sure that your team has got people who are very analytical or vice versa. That would be extremely critical. The last one I would say is the marketing field is changing so dramatically and it's impacted so much by the new technologies that are coming. You have to invest time to learn. At this stage in my life, in my career, I spend 5 hours every weekend purely for learning. I set aside that time to learn, whether it is the NFTs, whether it is the blockchains, whether it is AI, call it whatever. And I take Coursera courses and I watch videos which are actually educating me on this. I take reverse mentoring sessions. I read up a lot of books. There are many, many ways that you can learn, but you have to, because otherwise, if you're already in the field of marketing, you don't keep yourself up to date on these latest developments, you will become obsolete in no time, and you cannot affect that to happen to you. Those would be my 3 pieces of advice.
Raja, wow. Absolutely brilliant pieces of advice there. And I would hope that maybe in the future, as part of those 5 hours, you may come to the School of Marketing to both contribute as well as to learn some fresh insights into our industry.
I would be delighted to, absolutely. No, I'll be in touch with you on this, Vichy, but so long as you promise to send me an autographed a copy of your book.
That would be only a pleasure, my friend. An absolute pleasure. So look, this point in the show, myself and Mark just come up with a few key things that really struck us about the conversation. So let me go first and replay a couple of key themes. The first thing, by the way, coming into this conversation, I genuinely did not realize the impact that it would have on me. I think it's truly been an inspiring session, but inspiring, but insightful. And I think in equal measure, really twisting and turning my own view on what marketing really is and where the future actually is. So that's been absolutely brilliant for me. Is it bad to look good? Hey, what a line, right? What an absolute line. It's a line I'll remember for a long time. Intuition versus skill. You summed it up brilliantly when you talked about Da Vinci. As simple as that. You need both sides of the coin in order to be a brilliant marketer. The impact and impetus that you put into your purpose-driven brand, that is Mastercard now, to become a top 10 brand in the world and 8th in the US. Wow. But let me tell you, it's down to you and your teams and your hard work and contributions, because I know that's absolutely true, just sharing it from this conversation. Tough decisions kill the brand, kill the project when sometimes it isn't working as well as it should. I'm gonna talk about 2 more things that have struck me. One clearly is around personal branding. Wow, product, package, promotion, how you do that, all key. But trust is the center linchpin that kind of brings all those things together. And you also mentioned, you said, don't be too, your enthusiasm can take you into the sales territory, but don't let that happen. Think about the long term. I love that bit. And in fact, by the way, Saffron, one of our guests on the show, said, love this, Raja, hands down, the best advice on personal branding I've ever heard. So thank you for that, Saffron. And the last thing is around this 24 disruptors in the space for us to change the way marketing happens. 24, guys. We're in for a real rocky road, but a huge amount of opportunity. Thank you, Raja. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rich. Yeah, good job. I'm going to touch on some common themes. Actually, 3 things. One, I just love the fact that it was a happy accident that you found your way into marketing and have had the career you've had. I have to say, though, the purpose of the School of Marketing is that people don't come into marketing as a happy accident and we help them do it in a more deliberate way, but it's a beautiful story. I'm just going to restate the 4 Ps on personal branding: creating the pull, hugely insightful and very actionable, I think, for everybody who's listening in. And then the final thought, the Da Vinci thought, the whole brainness of marketing, getting more complicated, more exciting at the same time, but more challenging and demanding, but at the same time more rewarding. And I think that's a great way of looking at it. We need to be as whole-brained as we can, or if not, get the right people around us to do so. Raja, it's been wonderful to have you on. I don't know how we've managed to pack in so many insights in just 40 odd minutes, but it's been brilliant to have you on the show. And thank you on behalf of Richie and everyone listening in.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark and Richie. An absolute pleasure being with you all. And hopefully we'll do it again some other time. And I would love to understand and get into the details of the school, and both from a learning perspective as well as from a contributing perspective. Let's connect. And of course, I'll wait for your book. And I'll read it. Okay. Thank you very much. Stay safe and take care.
Take care.
Cheers, Roger.
Bye.
Bye.